When a man who knows only violence wakes beneath the shadow of 1,000 levels, in a galaxy ruled by empires and assassins, he becomes something the underworld has never seen before. The Crimson Wreath marks him for death. Imperial intelligence hunts him like prey. But John Wick was forged in a different fire, and this galaxy will learn what happens when you corner a man who has already lost everything. In a place where the Force binds all things, can a soul from beyond its reach survive? Or will the galaxy's darkness consume him before he finds his way home? The neon rain fell in sheets across the lower districts of Coruscant, each droplet reflecting the crimson and azure glow of cantina signs and flickering holoscreens that advertised pleasures both legal and forbidden. Down here, 5,000 levels below the Senate towers and their pristine marble facades, the galaxy's heart beat with a different rhythm, the pulse of survival, the currency of blood, the language of those who lived outside the light. The air tasted of ozone and recycled breath, of fried food and desperation, and in the narrow alleys between towering structures that stretched up into artificial daylight, shadows moved with purpose. This was where the forgotten came to forget, where killers came to kill, and where debts were paid in the only coin that truly mattered. On this night, in this place, destiny would carve a new legend into the steel bones of the city planet, though no one yet knew the name that would be whispered in fear before the twin suns rose again. John Wick opened his eyes to darkness and the smell of rust. His body responded before thought caught up. Muscle memory cataloging injury, environment, threat. His ribs ached. His knuckles were raw. The floor beneath him was durasteel, cold and unforgiving, and somewhere close by water dripped with metronomic precision. He rose slowly, testing each joint, each breath, finding nothing broken but everything bruised. The room was small, barely 3 meters square, with walls that bore the stains of old blood and newer scorch marks. A single glow panel flickered overhead, casting erratic shadows. The last thing he remembered was not this place. He remembered a house, a dog, the weight of grief that had finally begun to ease after years of carrying it like stones in his chest, and then light, blinding and cold, and the sensation of being pulled through a space that had no dimension, no up or down, only the terrible certainty of motion without movement. When the light faded, he had been here, and the man standing over him had been reaching for his coat with fingers that glinted with cheap rings. That man was dead now. Wick looked down at his hands. Blood crusted his fingernails. The body lay 3 meters away, crumpled against the far wall in a position that spoke of violence, both efficient and final. The would-be thief wore mismatched armor plates over a jumpsuit marked with symbols Wick did not recognize, and his belt held weapons that looked like nothing Wick had ever seen, cylindrical devices with grips and emitters instead of barrels. One such weapon lay near the corpse, its metal casing dented where Wick had used it as a bludgeon after the man made the mistake of drawing it too slowly. In the dead man's hand, clenched in rigor, was a small disc no larger than a credit chip. Wick retrieved it carefully, examining the surface. Intricate symbols were etched into the metal, swirling patterns that seemed to shift in the failing light. On one side, a maker's mark, a crimson wreath surrounding a dagger. On the other, coordinates in a script he could not read but understood instinctively were an address, a location, a destination, a marker. He had carried markers before, in another life, in another world. Promises of debt, of service, of blood owed and blood paid. The weight of this one felt familiar in his palm despite its alien design. The man who had tried to rob him had not expected resistance, had not expected Wick to wake during the theft, had certainly not expected to die for his greed. But in dying, he had provided a thread to pull, a direction to move. And Wick had learned long ago that motion was survival. He took the dead man's coat, a long black duster that fit reasonably well, and checked the pockets. A small pouch of coins, octagonal and marked with imperial sigils he did not recognize. A handful of cartridges that glowed faintly blue, a data chip, and a blaster, the weapon he had seen but not understood, now cold and heavy in his grip. The door to the room was unlocked. Beyond lay a corridor lit by bioluminescent strips, narrow and winding, with doors on either side that opened onto similar rooms, similar stories of desperation. This was a flophouse, a place where questions were not asked and names were not given, and as Wick moved through the halls, he saw others like himself. Transients, criminals, the lost and the hunted. They did not meet his eyes. Some animal instinct warned them away. The same instinct that kept prey from approaching predators even when both drank from the same watering hole. He emerged onto a street that defied comprehension. The scale was beyond anything he had known. Buildings rose in all directions, not merely up, but in layers upon layers, creating canyons of steel and plasteel that channeled the crowds like rivers through stone. Speeders flew overhead in designated lanes, their repulsor engines humming, and holographic advertisements flickered across every available surface, selling everything from weapons to companionship to passage off-world. The people were human and not human, species he had no names for, and they moved with the practiced indifference of those who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Above, far above, he could see the faint glow of higher levels, and beyond that, stars, not his stars. The realization settled in his chest like ice. This was not his world, not his city, not his life. But the marker in his pocket was real, and the blood on his hands was real, and somewhere in this alien sprawl was an answer to how he had come to be here and perhaps, if luck and skill held, a way back. He had no friends here, no allies, no continental to provide sanctuary or rules to constrain the violence. But he had the marker, and he had his hands, and that had always been enough before. The force stirred, though he did not feel it yet, rippling outward from his arrival like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Wick began to walk. The district was called the Sump, he learned, by listening to conversations in the first cantina he found. It sprawled across levels 1,000, 309 through 1,000, 315, a labyrinth of black markets and protection rackets, of gambling dens and assassination guilds, all operating under the nominal authority of the Empire but functionally autonomous, too small and too distant from the Senate to warrant direct intervention. The Empire collected taxes and looked away. The crime syndicates collected everything else. He found a vendor selling information and paid 3 of the octagonal coins for a primer on local power structures. The Crimson Wreath, the vendor explained in accented basic, was one of 3 major criminal organizations controlling the Sump. They specialized in contract killing, precision work, the kind of deaths that needed to look like accidents or disappear entirely. Their network extended across Coruscant and into the Mid-Rim, and their leader was a woman known only as Dame Mirella, who had never been seen without her mask, a silver construct said to have been forged from the helmet of a fallen Mandalorian. To cross the wreath was to invite death. To steal from them was worse. The marker, Wick understood, was a death sentence. The thief who attacked him must have stolen it, perhaps from a courier, perhaps from a dead client, and in doing so, had marked himself for execution. By killing the thief and taking the marker, Wick had inherited that execution. Somewhere in the Sump, assassins were already being dispatched, contracts already being fulfilled, and the only question was how long before they found him. He did not intend to wait. The coordinates on the marker led to an establishment 3 levels down, a place called the Broken Tether. Wick descended through maintenance shafts and cargo lifts, moving through spaces designed for droids and machinery rather than people. And as he descended, the architecture grew older, more corroded, the bones of ancient construction showing through like ribs through skin. Here the lighting was dimmer, the air thicker, and the crowds thinner but more dangerous. The Broken Tether occupied the ground floor of a structure that might once have been a warehouse. The entrance was guarded by 2 figures in crimson armor, their helmets featureless except for narrow visors, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Vibroblades, Wick guessed, though he had no name for them yet. They watched him approach with the stillness of those trained to kill. He stopped 3 meters away and held up the marker. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the guards spoke into a comm unit, words too quiet to hear, and the door behind them unsealed with a hiss of pressurized air. They stepped aside. An invitation and a trap, both at once. Wick entered. The interior was larger than the exterior suggested, extending back into the structure's foundation, and the space had been converted into something between a social club and a fortress. Tables were arranged in concentric circles around a central dais, and at each table sat figures in various states of armament and readiness. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, enforcers. The walls were lined with alcoves, each containing a different weapon on display. Blaster rifles, disruptor pistols, thermal detonators, and stranger things he could not identify. The lighting was low, colored crimson by filters that cast everything in shades of blood and shadow. On the dais sat a woman. She wore robes of deep black silk that seemed to absorb light, and her mask was indeed silver, worked into the shape of a Mandalorian helmet, but stylized, feminized, with horn-like projections rising from the temples. Her hands rested on the arms of her chair, and her fingers were adorned with rings that glittered with what might have been gemstones or might have been something more dangerous. When she spoke, her voice carried through the room without amplification, each word measured and cold. "The marker you carry was stolen from a courier in my employ 3 days ago. The thief was to be brought before me alive. You have brought me nothing but questions. Explain yourself, or be added to the collection." Wick met the mask's gaze and felt nothing but the clarity that always came before violence. "The thief attacked me," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I defended myself. I took what was his. Now it's yours. I want nothing from your organization except to be left alone." A ripple of laughter moved through the room, cruel and anticipating. Dame Myrala tilted her head, a gesture that might have been curiosity or contempt. "Left alone," she repeated. "You arrive in my territory, kill one of my hunters, take a marker that represents a debt of 500,000 credits, and you wish to be left alone. Tell me, stranger, do you understand where you are? Do you comprehend the magnitude of your mistake?" "I understand that I'm somewhere I don't want to be," Wick said. "And I understand that if you send people after me, they'll die. Save yourself the expense." The room went silent. It was the silence of predators recognizing another predator, of killers understanding that the threat was not bravado but statement of fact. Several of the figures at the tables shifted, hands moving toward weapons, and Wick felt his pulse slow, his breathing deepen, his awareness expanding to catalog every angle, every exit, every potential threat. He had fought in rooms like this before, in the Red Circle, in the Hall of Mirrors, in places where death was currency and skill was the only law. Dame Myrala stood. She was taller than he had expected, her movements fluid despite the weight of her robes, and as she descended from the dais, the crowd parted. She stopped a meter away, close enough that he could see his own reflection in her mask's polished surface. "You have courage," she said quietly, "or ignorance. I have not yet decided which. But the marker represents a debt, and debts must be paid. I will offer you this. Complete the contract the marker was attached to, and I will consider your transgression forgiven. Refuse, and you will discover why the Crimson Wreath is feared across 17 systems." "What's the contract?" "A man named Dalis Kron. He owes me a considerable sum and has chosen to hide rather than pay. You will find him. You will bring him to me, and you will do so within 3 days, or the marker becomes void and you become prey." She extended a data chip, and Wick took it. "One question," he said. "How did I get here? To this world, this city? I wasn't here yesterday." The mask betrayed nothing, but her voice carried a note of something that might have been interest. "You do not know," she said, and it was not a question. "How fascinating. Perhaps, if you survive, we will discuss it. But for now, you have work to do. The clock, as they say, is ticking." She turned and ascended the dais once more, and the audience was over. Wick left the way he came, the guards watching but not following, and as he emerged into the street, he felt the weight of eyes on his back, the sensation of being marked, catalogued, measured for a grave. The Crimson Wreath would be watching. If he failed, they would kill him. If he succeeded, he might earn enough goodwill to ask the questions that truly mattered. He activated the data chip using a public terminal 3 blocks away. Dalis Kron's face appeared, human, middle-aged, with the soft features of someone who had lived comfortably until very recently. The file listed his last known location as a cantina in the Uskru district, 4 levels up, and noted that he had hired bodyguards, mercenaries with minor reputations but sufficient skill to deter casual collection efforts. The debt was listed as 800,000 credits, accrued through gambling and poor business ventures, and the collection order specified alive but did not specify intact. Wick memorized the face, the location, the relevant details, and deleted the file. 3 days. It would be enough. He found a weapons dealer in a side alley, an old Duros with cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, and traded the blaster he had taken from the dead thief for something more practical, a DL-44 heavy blaster pistol, worn but well maintained, and 2 spare power packs. The Duros asked no questions, and Wick offered no explanations. The weapon felt better in his hand than the previous one, heavier, more substantial, and when he test-fired it into a bundle of rags in the back of the shop, the recoil was manageable and the bolt burned clean through. He also purchased a vibroblade, short and balanced for close work, and a holster rig that fit beneath the duster. Armed and oriented, he made his way toward the Uskru district as the city's artificial night deepened. The cantina was called the Gilded Sarlacc, and it occupied a corner position with good sightlines and multiple exits, the kind of place frequented by those who valued survival over ambience. Music throbbed from within, something with a driving beat and wordless vocals, and through the transparasteel windows, Wick could see the crowd, a mix of humans, Twi'leks, Rhodians, and others, all drinking and talking and trying to forget whatever had brought them to this level. The bodyguards were obvious, 2 of them flanking the entrance and 2 more inside, positioned near a booth in the back where Dalis Kron sat with a drink and a datapad, his face pale and drawn. Wick observed from across the street for 20 minutes, timing the patrols, noting the patterns, identifying weaknesses. The guards were competent but not exceptional. They scanned the crowd periodically but spent too much time watching the entrance and not enough watching the back. They wore light armor, blast vests and helmets, and carried blaster carbines slung across their chests. Mercenaries, as the file had indicated, hired muscle without loyalty beyond the paycheck. He could kill them all. The thought came easily, instinctively, a solution presenting itself with the same clarity as arithmetic. 4 guards, perhaps 30 civilians, Kron himself unarmed, entry through the back, moving fast, putting down the rear guards before they could raise the alarm, then the front before they could react. Kron subdued or killed depending on compliance, exit through the kitchen. Total time, 90 seconds, but something made him hesitate. Not mercy, not compassion, but the recognition that this was not his world, not his rules, and every corpse left behind was a question mark that would draw attention he could not yet afford. The Crimson Wreath was watching. The Empire, whatever that meant, had eyes everywhere, and he was alone, without backup, without sanctuary, without any of the structures that had once made his work possible. He needed to be smarter. Wick circled to the cantina's rear entrance, a service door used by droids and delivery personnel, and waited until a droid emerged with a load of trash. He slipped inside while the door was still cycling, moving through a kitchen thick with steam and the smell of frying meat, and none of the cooks looked up from their work. He was a shadow, a ghost, there and gone before the mind could register the presence. The back hallway led to the main room, and he could see Kron's booth through the crowd. One of the rear guards stood 5 meters away, scanning left, then right, never quite looking behind. Wick moved. He closed the distance in 3 steps, his hand clamping over the guard's mouth, while the vibroblade punched up through the gap in the armor beneath the ribs, angled toward the heart. The guard stiffened, convulsed once, and went limp. Wick lowered him silently into the shadows behind a column and took his blaster carbine, checking the charge and the safety with practiced efficiency. The second rear guard was turning, his peripheral vision catching movement. Wick shot him twice, center mass, the bolts burning through armor and flesh with brief flares of superheated light. The guard dropped. The music covered the sound, but not the motion, and suddenly the front guards were moving, shouting into comms, weapons rising. The crowd scattered. Wick moved forward, firing as he walked, each shot deliberate, each target center mass or head depending on angle and armor. The first front guard took a bolt to the throat and fell backward through the entrance, his carbine firing wild into the ceiling. The second managed to return fire, and Wick felt the heat of a bolt pass centimeters from his head, the displaced air hot enough to singe. He dropped to one knee, sighted, fired, and the guard's helmet exploded in a spray of molten plasteel and worse things. Kron was running for the side exit. Wick pursued, vaulting over a table, his coat flaring behind him, and caught Kron at the threshold. He grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against the wall hard enough to rattle teeth, then pressed the carbine's barrel under his chin. "I'm here for the Crimson Wreath," Wick said. "You're coming with me. Fight, and I'll break both your legs and carry you. Understand?" Kron nodded, eyes wide, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Wick zip-tied his hands, using a restraint taken from one of the dead guards, and hauled him toward the back exit, moving quickly now, the window of opportunity closing. Behind them, the cantina was in chaos, patrons screaming, security alarms wailing, and somewhere distant sirens began to rise. Imperial security, he guessed, responding to reports of blaster fire in a public space. He pushed Kron through the kitchen, past the startled cooks, and out into the alley. A speeder was parked 2 blocks away, an older model with scratched paint and no visible security, and Wick broke the ignition with the vibroblade's pommel, hot wiring the repulsor engine the way he had once hot-wired cars in another life. The speeder shuddered to life, rising a meter off the ground, and he shoved Kron into the passenger seat and accelerated into traffic, merging with the flow of vehicles that moved through the district like blood through veins. No one followed. He drove for an hour, winding through levels and districts, watching the mirrors, ensuring no tail, and when he was satisfied, he descended back to the sump and made his way to the broken tether. The guards at the entrance recognized him, or recognized Kron, and the doors opened without challenge. Dame Myrala was waiting on her dais. Wick dragged Kron forward and forced him to his knees before her. "Your contract," he said, "fulfilled." The mask tilted downward, regarding the trembling man, and then Myrala gestured. 2 of her enforcers came forward and hauled Kron away, his protests fading as they disappeared through a side door. When she looked back at Wick, her voice carried a note of approval. "Efficient," she said. "Brutal, but efficient. The guards at the cantina are dead, I assume. 4. Their employers will want compensation. I will handle it. As for you, consider your debt paid. The marker is voided, and you are free to go. Unless, of course, you wish to stay." Wick felt the weight of exhaustion pulling at him, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind only the ache of bruised muscles and older wounds. "I need information," he said, "about how I came to be here. You said if I survived, we could discuss it." Myrala stood and descended from the dais, stopping closer than before, close enough that he could smell something like incense and ozone. "You are not from this galaxy," she said, and it was not a question. "I have seen others like you, though rarely. Travelers, displaced, brought here by forces even the Jedi do not fully understand. The Force itself, some say, though others claim it is technology, ancient and forgotten, buried in the ruins of civilizations that predate the Republic. You want to know how you arrived? I cannot tell you. But I can tell you this: you were brought here for a reason, and until that reason is fulfilled or rejected, you will remain. What reason? That, stranger, is for you to discover. But know this: the galaxy is at war. The Empire tightens its grip. The rebellion struggles in the shadows, and in the spaces between, people like us thrive. You have skills, rare skills, skills that could make you wealthy, powerful, feared, or they could get you killed. The choice is yours. She extended a small data chip, different from the first. "A gift," she said. Information on others who have arrived as you did. Some adapted, some went mad, some disappeared. Study them, if you wish, or ignore them and make your own path. But whatever you choose, do so quickly. Your arrival has been noticed, and not only by me. Wick took the chip. Who else? The Empire has a division dedicated to anomalies, Imperial Intelligence specifically. They collect individuals like you, study them, use them when possible, dispose of them when not. Commander Rael Taris leads the division, and he is very, very good at his work. If you value your freedom, you will avoid his attention. But I suspect it may already be too late for that. She turned and walked back to her dais, and the audience was concluded. Wick left the broken tether with more questions than answers, the data chip heavy in his pocket. And as he emerged into the neon-soaked streets of the Sump, he felt the galaxy's weight settling on his shoulders like a mantle. He was far from home, far from anything he understood. But he was alive, and he was armed, and somewhere in this sprawling city planet was the truth he needed. He would find it, no matter how many he had to go through to get there. The Force shuddered, recognizing will forged in another crucible, another universe, and it began to watch. The data chip contained files on 17 individuals, each one a story of displacement and adaptation, and Wick read them in a rented room 3 levels above the Sump, the door barricaded, the blaster within reach. The room was barely larger than a storage closet, with a narrow bunk and a single glow panel. But it was defensible and cheap, and those were the only criteria that mattered. Most of the displaced had died within weeks of arrival, some at the hands of criminals who saw them as easy marks, others at the hands of Imperial Intelligence, captured and dissected in laboratories whose existence was not officially acknowledged. A few had adapted, finding niches in the underworld or the mercenary guilds, learning the languages and customs, acquiring weapons and armor and the will to use them. One had become a bounty hunter of some renown, operating out of the Outer Rim. Another had joined a rebel cell and died in a raid on an Imperial supply depot. None had found a way home. The files were clinical, detailed, compiled by someone with access to resources Wick could only guess at. Dame Myrala's reach, he realized, extended farther than he had assumed. She was not merely a crime lord. She was an intelligence broker, a collector of secrets, and the Crimson Wreath was both shield and sword. One file stood out. A woman named Kara then, displaced 14 months prior, had survived longer than any other. She had been a soldier in her original world, special forces, and her skills had translated well to the galaxy's endless conflicts. The file noted that she had worked for the Wreath for 6 months before striking out on her own, establishing a safe-house network across Coruscant's lower levels. Her last known location was a district called the Cauldron, 50 levels down from the Sump, and the file speculated that she was still alive, still operating, still searching for a way back. Wick memorized the address. If anyone could provide insight into his situation, it would be someone who had walked the same path. And if she was dead, her safe house might still hold resources he could use. Either way, it was a lead, and leads were all he had. He slept for 4 hours, a light sleep trained into him by years of living on the edge of violence, and when he woke, the city's artificial dawn was beginning to filter down through the layers of construction. He washed his face with recycled water from a dispenser, checked his weapons, and left the room without looking back. The Cauldron was worse than the Sump. 50 levels down, the architecture was older still, pre-imperial, built during the Clone Wars or perhaps even earlier during the Old Republic. The structures here were failing, their bones corroded by time and neglect, and entire sections had collapsed into rubble that no one bothered to clear. The population was thinner but more desperate, and Wick saw things in the shadows that might have been people or might have been something else, hunched and starving and feral. The address led to a building that had once been a residential tower but now functioned as a vertical slum, each floor divided into dozens of tiny compartments. Kara then's safe house, according to the file, was on the 32nd floor, accessible via an exterior stairwell that clung to the building's side like a rusted spine. Wick climbed carefully, testing each step, and when he reached the 32nd floor, he found the door marked with a symbol, 3 horizontal lines crossed by a single vertical line, scratched into the durasteel. A code, perhaps, or a warning. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. The door opened a crack, and a woman's voice came from within. "Who sent you?" "No one," Wick said. "I'm looking for Kara then. She's dead. Then I'm looking for answers she might have left behind." A pause, and then the door opened wider. The woman who stood there was not Kara then. She was younger, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair cut short and eyes that held the same wariness Wick had seen in soldiers who had survived too many battles. She wore a jumpsuit patched with armor plates, and a blaster hung from her hip in a worn holster. Behind her, the safe house was small but organized, with weapons racked on one wall and supplies stacked on another. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who arrived the same way Kara did. Dame Myrala gave me her file. I'm looking for information on how to get back." The woman studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Kara's dead 6 weeks now," she said as he entered. "Caught by Imperial intelligence and disappeared. They don't take people to prisons. They take them to black sites. I'm Sira. I worked with her. Helped her build this network. And before you ask, no, I don't know how to send you home. No one does." Wick looked around the room, cataloging the resources. A dozen blasters of various types, thermal detonators, med packs, ration bars, data chips stacked in neat rows. This was an operational base, designed for someone who expected trouble and planned to survive it. "What do you know?" he asked. Sarah poured herself a cup of something that steamed and smelled bitter, then leaned against the wall. Kara said she was pulled here by something she called the threshold. A moment when reality folded, and she stepped through without meaning to. She spent months trying to find others who had experienced it, and she found 3. All of them said the same thing. There was a sensation of being watched, of a presence that decided they were needed here for reasons they couldn't understand. One of them thought it was the Force. Another thought it was a machine. Kara thought it was both. "The Force," Wick repeated, the word alien on his tongue. "You don't know what that is," Sarah said, and it was not a question. "You really are new. The Force it's energy, life. It binds the galaxy together, connects all living things. The Jedi used it for peace. The Sith used it for power. The Empire hunts anyone who can touch it, because the Emperor fears rivals. If the Force pulled you here, then you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that means you're in danger." Wick felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Kara believed the threshold could be reversed. Sarah continued. She thought if she could find the source, the place, or the device, or the person who controlled it, she could use it to go home. She spent months searching, and when she got close, Imperial intelligence took her. They wanted what she knew, and they'll want what you know too once they find you. "Then I'll make sure they don't find me." Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They always find you. Commander Taris is relentless. He has resources you can't imagine. Agents embedded in every criminal organization, every guild, every corner of this planet. If you killed 4 mercenaries in the Uskru district last night, he already knows your face. If you worked for the Crimson Wreath, he already has your profile. Your only advantage is that he'll want you alive, at least at first. He collects people like you, studies them, uses them as weapons. Let him try." Sarah pushed off from the wall and walked to the weapon rack, selecting a blaster rifle and checking its charge. Kara said the same thing. "She was one of the best soldiers I ever met, and they took her anyway. If you want to survive, you need to disappear. Change your identity. Get off Coruscant. Find a hole in the outer rim where the Empire's reach is weaker. Or you can do what Kara tried to do. Find the threshold and use it. But that path leads to Imperial intelligence, and they won't let you take it." Wick considered this, weighing options, calculating risks. "Where would I start?" he asked. "If I wanted to find the threshold." Sarah sighed and set the rifle down. "There's a scholar in the Works District, a Bith named Orvain Kell. He studies ancient technology, pre-Republic artifacts, things the Jedi Order sealed away or forgot. Kara consulted with him, and he pointed her towards something called the Rakatan Gate, a device built by a species that ruled the galaxy thousands of years ago. He said the gate could fold space, move people between worlds, between realities. But it was dismantled and scattered, its pieces hidden across the galaxy. Kara found a map, partial, on a data chip she took from an Imperial courier. I still have it. She retrieved a chip from the stack and held it out. This will get you killed, she said. But if you're determined, it's a start. Wick took the chip. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't lead them here. I've lost enough already. He left the safe house and descended the rusted stairwell, the chip in his pocket and a destination forming in his mind. The Works District was another 20 levels down, deeper into Coruscant's industrial heart, and if the scholar Orvane Kell had answers, Wick would find him. But first, he needed to address the immediate problem: Imperial intelligence. Commander Rael Taris would be watching, would be waiting. And if Wick was going to move freely, he needed to understand his enemy. He found a public access terminal in a transit station and used the dead thief's coins to purchase access to the local infoweb. The search for Commander Rael Taris returned limited results, most of them redacted or classified, but enough fragments remained to paint a picture. Taris was a career officer, risen through the ranks of Imperial intelligence through a combination of ruthlessness and competence. He specialized in anomalies, individuals or phenomena that defied standard Imperial doctrine, and his division operated with near-total autonomy, answering only to the highest levels of command. He had a reputation for efficiency and cruelty in equal measure, and those who fell into his custody rarely emerged intact. Wick memorized the face that appeared in the few available images: sharp features, cold eyes, the look of a man who saw people as tools or obstacles, and nothing in between. An enemy, then, one who would have to be dealt with eventually, but not yet. He deleted his search history and moved deeper into the city's labyrinth, the weight of the galaxy pressing down, the path ahead uncertain but clear enough to follow. He would find Orvane Kell, he would learn about the Rakatan Gate, and if the Force had brought him here, he would make it send him back, or he would burn this galaxy down trying. The Works District smelled of slag and molten metal, and the air tasted like copper and ash. This was where Coruscant's foundries operated, massive automated facilities that consumed raw ore and exhaled starship hulls, weapons, armor, and 1,000 other necessities of galactic civilization. The noise was constant, a rhythmic pounding that shook the durasteel beneath Wick's boots, and the heat was oppressive even this far from the furnaces, radiating up through grates and vents until the very atmosphere shimmered. Orvane Kell's workshop occupied a corner of an abandoned smelting facility, and Wick found it by following directions purchased from a droid vendor who asked no questions beyond the transaction. The workshop was small, cluttered with devices and artifacts that glowed with faint bioluminescence or crackled with residual energy, and at the center of the chaos sat a Bith, his bulbous cranium bent over a work table covered in circuitry and ancient components. The Bith looked up as Wick entered, his large black eyes reflecting the workshop's dim lighting. "You are not a customer," Orvane Kell said, his voice melodic and precise. "You carry violence like a cloak. State your purpose or leave." "I was sent by a woman named Syrah. She said you helped Kara then." Orvane's expression shifted, something that might have been sorrow. "Kara is dead," he said, "taken by those who fear knowledge. You are another like her, yes? Displaced. Searching for a way home. I helped her as much as I could, and it was not enough. What makes you believe I can help you? Because I don't have any other options." Orvane studied him for a long moment, then gestured to a chair made of salvaged components. "Sit. I will tell you what I know, though I warn you. The knowledge brings only danger. The Rakatan Gate is not a myth, but it is not what you hope it to be. The Rakata were an ancient species, powerful in the Force and advanced in technology, and they built many things before their empire collapsed. The gate was one of their greatest achievements, a device capable of opening pathways through space and time, connecting distant points in the galaxy or even reaching beyond it into other dimensions, other realities. But the gate was also their greatest failure. It required immense power, power drawn from the Force itself, and in using it, the Rakata enslaved entire species, drained entire worlds. When their empire fell, the Jedi Order dismantled the gate and scattered its pieces across the galaxy, hiding them so they could never be reassembled. Where are the pieces? That is the question Kara asked. The answer is incomplete. I have records, fragments of maps, references in texts that predate the Republic, but the Empire also seeks the gate. Commander Taris has been searching for it for years, and he is closer than anyone realizes. If you pursue this, you will find yourself in direct opposition to Imperial intelligence, and they will kill you without hesitation. Wick leaned forward. I don't care about the Empire. I care about getting home. If the gate can do that, I'll find it, and I'll use it. Tell me where to start. Orvane hesitated, then activated a holoprojector on the worktable. A star map appeared, three-dimensional and rotating slowly, with dozens of systems highlighted in red. These are possible locations, Orvane said. Each one contains something the Rakata left behind, a temple, a ruin, a fragment of their civilization. But most are in Imperial-controlled space, and many are on worlds that are hostile to life. Kara identified one location as the most promising, a moon called Varn. Orbiting a gas giant in the Taris system, the moon was once a Rakatan research station, and Imperial records indicate unusual energy readings consistent with gate technology. But Varn is also a quarantine zone. The moon was contaminated during the Clone Wars, and the Empire forbids travel there. How do I get there? You will need a ship, which is expensive. You will need a pilot willing to break Imperial law, which is expensive and dangerous. And you will need a way to survive Varn's surface, which may be impossible. Kara never made it there. Imperial intelligence intercepted her before she could leave Coruscant. Wick absorbed this, calculating the obstacles, the resources required, the risks. I'll find a way. Orvane reached beneath the work table and retrieved a small device, cylindrical and etched with symbols that glowed faintly blue. This is a locator beacon, he said. Rakatan design, rebuilt by me. If you reach Varn and activate it near gate fragments, it will resonate and guide you. Consider it a gift, though I doubt it will be enough to save you. Wick took the beacon, the metal warm against his palm. Thank you. Do not thank me. Kara thanked me, and she is dead. Go, if you must. But know that the galaxy does not forgive those who reach for power they do not understand. Wick left the workshop and emerged into the works district's furnace heat, the locator beacon secure in his coat, the path forward fractured but visible. He needed a ship. He needed a pilot, and he needed to acquire both without drawing the attention of Imperial intelligence, which was already searching for him. The criminal underworld, he had learned, ran on favors and debts. The Crimson Wreath had given him a marker, and now he would call it in. He returned to the sump and made his way to the broken tether, the guards recognizing him and allowing him passage without question. Dame Myrala was not on her dais, but one of her lieutenants directed him to a private chamber deeper in the complex, a room lined with data screens and star maps, where the crime lord stood studying a holographic display of Coruscant's orbital traffic. She turned as he entered, her silver mask reflecting the blue glow of the hologram. You return quickly, she said. I assume you bring another request. I need a ship and a pilot, willing to travel to a quarantine zone in Imperial space. Discreet. Capable. Myrala tilted her head. A simple request with complicated implications. Where do you intend to go? The Taris system. A moon called Varn. Her posture shifted, subtle but noticeable. Varn, she repeated. You are either very brave or very foolish. The moon is forbidden for good reason. What could possibly be there that is worth the risk? Something I need, and you believe I will simply provide you with a ship and pilot out of generosity? I am a businesswoman, stranger. What do you offer in return? Wick met the mask's gaze. You said I have skills. Skills that could make me valuable. I'll work for you. Contracts, collections, whatever you need, until the debt is paid. Mirala stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. You would bind yourself to the Crimson Wreath in exchange for passage to a moon that may kill you before you set foot on its surface. Tell me, what drives you? Desperation? Obsession? Or something else? I want to go home. The simplicity of the answer seemed to amuse her, and she laughed softly. Home. The oldest desire and the most painful. Very well, I will provide what you require, but understand this. If you survive Varn, you will owe me 10 contracts, not collections, not simple work. Assassinations. High-value targets. Individuals who are well protected and well connected. Refuse, and I will ensure you never leave Coruscant alive. Do we have an accord? Wick considered the weight of the deal, the price of failure, the cost of success. We do. Then I will make the arrangements. Return here tomorrow at this hour, and your ship will be waiting at Docking Bay Orex 7, sublevel 1313. The pilot is a woman named Silen Vaz. She is reckless, expensive, and one of the best smugglers in the Coruscant underworld. Do not insult her, do not question her, and do not attempt to commandeer her ship. She answers to me, and she will deliver you to Varn. After that, you are on your own. She extended a data chip, and Wick took it. One more thing, Mirala said. Commander Taris is searching for you. He has placed a bounty on your capture, 100,000 credits, alive only. My organization will not collect, but others will. Move carefully, and do not trust anyone outside these walls. Wick nodded and left the chamber, the data chip in his pocket. The deal struck. He had 24 hours to prepare, to gather supplies, to steel himself for what lay ahead, and then he would leave Coruscant behind, descending into the unknown depths of the galaxy in search of a way home. But first, he needed to survive the night. The bounty announcement spread through the sump like fire through dry grass, and within hours, Wick felt the city's attention shift. Faces that had ignored him now watched. Conversations quieted as he passed. The predators were circling, calculating odds, weighing the risk of capture against the reward. He moved through the district with deliberate unpredictability, varying his route, avoiding main thoroughfares, keeping to spaces where crowds provided cover. The blaster hung heavy beneath his coat, and the vibroblade rested against his spine, both within easy reach. He had lived this way before, in New York, when the high table had marked him and every killer in the city had come hunting. He knew the rhythm of it. The hyper-awareness, the careful management of adrenaline, the understanding that death could come from any angle at any moment. The first attempt came in a transit station. Wick was waiting for a lift when he felt the shift in the crowd's energy, a subtle parting as 3 figures moved toward him with the purposeful stride of those who had already committed to violence. They were human, dressed in mismatched armor, and they carried blaster pistols openly, the safeties off. Bounty hunters, he guessed, working together to maximize their chances. He stepped into the lift as it arrived, and they followed. The doors closed, sealing them in a space barely 2 meters square, and the lead hunter reached for his weapon. Wick moved first. His hand snapped out, catching the hunter's wrist and twisting until bone cracked and the blaster clattered to the floor. He drove his elbow into the man's throat, crushing the trachea, then pivoted and kicked the second hunter in the knee, hyperextending the joint with a wet pop. The third hunter managed to draw his blaster, but Wick was already moving, closing the distance, his vibroblade punching through the armor's weak point beneath the arm. The hunter gasped and collapsed, and the lift doors opened onto an empty platform. Wick dragged the bodies out and left them in a maintenance closet, taking their weapons and their credits, then continued downward, descending another 10 levels before emerging into a district called the Void, where the city's infrastructure failed entirely and entire sections were open to the planet's lower atmosphere, perpetually dark and eternally cold. Here, he found a safe house, a room in a building that had been condemned but still held squatters and those who valued anonymity over comfort. He barricaded the door, set a tripwire with a thermal detonator, and finally allowed himself to rest, his body demanding sleep even as his mind catalogued threats. He dreamed of his home, of the house and the dog, and when he woke, the ache in his chest was worse than any physical wound. The next morning, he made his way to Docking Bay RX-7. The bay was located in sub-level 1313, a designation that carried weight among those who knew Coruscant's depths. This was the level where the city's foundation began, where the structures built upon structures finally gave way to bedrock and ancient machinery. The air here was cold and stale, recycled so many times that it tasted like metal, and the lighting was sporadic, whole sections lit only by emergency glow strips or the flickering light of dying panels. Docking Bay RX-7 was a private facility guarded by automated turrets and a single massive blast door that required authorization to open. Wick transmitted the code from the data chip Myrella had given him, and the door groaned upward, revealing a bay large enough to hold a dozen ships but currently occupied by only one. The ship was a light freighter, old but well-maintained, with a hull marked by scorch marks and patched repairs that spoke of hard use and harder escapes. Its engines glowed faintly blue, idling, and the boarding ramp was down. Standing at the base of the ramp was a woman. Silen Vars was tall, Zabrak, with skin the color of rust and small horns protruding from her skull in a crown-like pattern. She wore a flight suit that had been modified with armor plates, and a heavy blaster hung from her hip in a quick-draw rig. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and when she looked at Wick, he saw a mind that missed nothing. "You're the one Myrella sent," she said. It was not a question. "I am. You look like trouble. The bounty on your head is up to 150 now. Every hunter in the sector is looking for you, and you want me to fly you to a quarantine zone. Tell me why I shouldn't just stun you and collect the credits myself." "Because Myrella told you not to." Selene smirked. "Fair point. All right, Trouble, get on board. We leave in 5 minutes, and if you slow me down, I'm dumping you out an airlock. The ship is called the Rusty Dagger, and she's faster than she looks. Varn is 3 days away, assuming we don't get stopped by Imperial patrols, pirates, or any of the dozen other things that can kill you in hyperspace. You have supplies?" Wick held up a pack he had assembled. "Rations, med packs, spare power packs, the locator beacon." "Good. Find a bunk and stay out of my way. I don't like passengers, and I especially don't like passengers who attract Imperial attention." She turned and ascended the ramp, and Wick followed, stepping into the ship's interior. The Rusty Dagger was cramped but functional, with a cockpit forward, a small cargo hold amidships, and crew quarters aft. The walls were lined with storage lockers, and the floor was durasteel grating that vibrated faintly with the engine's hum. Selene sealed the ramp and moved to the cockpit, her hands flying over the controls with practiced ease. The ship lifted from the bay floor, rotated toward the exit tunnel, and accelerated smoothly into the darkness. Wick found a jump seat and strapped in, watching through the viewport as the tunnel gave way to open sky, the perpetual twilight of Coruscant's lower atmosphere, and then, as they climbed, the stars. The transition to hyperspace was jarring, reality folding around the ship as the stars stretched into lines of light, and then they were in that strange non-space, traveling faster than light through dimensions Wick did not understand. The ship's interior hummed with the hyperdrive's rhythm, a deep thrumming that felt almost alive, and for the first time since his arrival, Wick felt a moment of something that might have been peace. Selene emerged from the cockpit an hour later and leaned against the bulkhead, studying him. "You're not like the others Myrella sends," she said. "Most of them talk too much or try to intimidate me. You just sit there. It's unsettling." "I don't have anything to say." "Everyone has something to say. They just don't always say it. So let me ask you something. Why Varn? What's on that moon that's worth dying for?" Wick met her gaze. "A way home." Silen's expression shifted, something that might have been understanding. "You're displaced," she said. "Like Kara then. I flew her once, before she disappeared. She said the same thing, that she was looking for a way home. She never found it, and you probably won't either. But I respect the attempt. Just don't expect me to die for your cause. I'll get you to Varn, and I'll wait 48 hours. If you're not back by then, I'm leaving." "Understood." She pushed off the bulkhead and headed back to the cockpit, and Wick was alone with his thoughts once more. The journey to Varn passed in silence, broken only by the ship's systems and the occasional course correction. Wick spent the time maintaining his weapons, reviewing what little information he had on the moon, and preparing himself mentally for what lay ahead. The locator beacon Orvane had given him rested on the bunk beside him, its symbols pulsing faintly, and he found himself staring at it, wondering what forces had brought him to this galaxy, this ship, this moment. The Force, Sarah had said, a living energy that connected all things. He did not feel it, did not believe in it, not the way the people of this galaxy seemed to. But he could not deny that something had pulled him here, something beyond chance or accident, and until he understood what that something was, he would not stop moving forward. On the third day, the ship dropped out of hyperspace, and Varn filled the viewport. The moon was small, barely a quarter the size of Earth's moon, and it orbited a massive gas giant whose bands of color swirled in hypnotic patterns. Varn's surface was gray and scarred, pockmarked with craters and fissures, and as the ship descended, Wick could see the remnants of structures, domes, towers, platforms, all crumbling and abandoned. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, according to the ship's sensors, though the temperature was well below freezing. Silen guided the ship toward a relatively flat landing zone near the largest ruin, a structure that might once have been a research facility. The landing struts extended, and the ship settled onto the moon's surface with a hiss of repulsors and a faint shudder. "This is it," Silen said over the intercom. "Welcome to Varn. Try not to die immediately." Wick gathered his pack, secured his weapons, and activated the locator beacon. It pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady rhythm, the glow brighter now, as if responding to proximity. He descended the ramp and stepped onto the moon's surface, his breath misting in the cold air, his boots crunching on frost-covered regolith. The ruins stretched before him, skeletal and ancient, and somewhere within them was the answer he sought. He began to walk. The ruins of Varn were a graveyard of ambition, and as Wick moved through the shattered corridors and collapsed halls, he felt the weight of millennia pressing down. The architecture was alien, geometries that defied human aesthetics, with walls that curved without logic and ceilings that seemed to shift when observed from different angles. Rakatan design, Orvane had said, built by a species that had mastered both the Force and technology before their empire devoured itself. The locator beacon led him deeper, its pulse growing faster as he approached something it recognized. He passed through chambers filled with debris, shattered consoles, broken machinery, skeletal remains that might have been humanoid or might have been something else entirely. The air was still, undisturbed for centuries, and his footsteps echoed in the silence. Twice he saw movement in his peripheral vision, quick shadows that vanished when he turned, and he kept his hand near the blaster, every sense alert. The beacon's pulse became urgent, almost frantic, and he found himself standing before a massive door, 10 meters tall and 5 wide, made of a metal that shimmered with iridescent light. Symbols covered its surface, the same script he had seen on the marker, on the beacon, spiraling inward toward a central point where a circular depression awaited. Wick studied the door, then the beacon. He pressed the beacon into the depression. The door shuddered and began to open, ancient mechanisms groaning, dust falling in cascades, and light spilled out from within, brilliant and cold. Wick shielded his eyes, waiting for them to adjust, and when the door had fully opened, he stepped through into a chamber that defied comprehension. The room was vast, a sphere perhaps 100 meters in diameter, and its walls were covered in circuitry that glowed with living light, blue and green and gold, pulsing in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose. At the chamber's center, suspended in mid-air by forces he could not see, was a ring of black metal, perhaps 10 meters across, inscribed with symbols that seemed to move and writhe. The ring rotated slowly, and within its circumference, space itself appeared distorted, warped, as if the fabric of reality had been torn and folded. The gate, or a piece of it. Wick approached slowly, the locator beacon hot in his hand, and as he drew near, the ring's rotation quickened, the symbols glowing brighter, and he felt something he had not expected, a pull, a tugging sensation in his chest, as if the gate recognized him, as if it knew he did not belong to this galaxy and offered passage elsewhere. But before he could reach out, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Stop." Wick turned, his hand dropping to the blaster, and saw figures emerging from the shadows behind him. 6 of them, clad in black armor marked with Imperial sigils, carrying blaster rifles and moving with military precision. And at their center, a man in an officer's uniform, his face sharp and cold, his eyes fixed on Wick with the intensity of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "Commander Rael Taris, you are a difficult man to find," Taris said, his voice calm, measured. "But ultimately, everyone makes a mistake. Yours was believing Dame Myrala could be trusted. She sold you to me the moment you made your deal. The ship you arrived on has been tracked since it left Coruscant, and my agents have been waiting here for 3 days. Now, lower your weapon and step away from the gate. You are too valuable to kill, but I will if I must." Wick's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, probabilities of success. 6 soldiers, well-trained, well-armed. Taris himself likely augmented with cybernetics or combat training. The chamber was open, offering no cover, and the gate was tantalizingly close, its pull growing stronger, promising escape. He did not lower his weapon. "I'm not going with you," he said. Taris sighed, a sound of genuine disappointment. "I had hoped you would be pragmatic." "Very well. Soldiers, incapacitate him, non-lethal force only. The Emperor wants him intact." The soldiers raised their rifles. Wick drew and fired in the same motion, the blaster kicking against his palm, the bolt catching the nearest soldier in the throat. The man fell, and chaos erupted. Wick was already moving, diving behind a column of machinery, return fire searing the air where he had stood. He rolled, came up firing, dropped a second soldier, then vaulted over a console and put the gate between himself and the remaining 4. The soldiers advanced, spreading out, attempting to flank, and Wick used the chamber's geometry against them, forcing them into narrow firing lanes, picking them off one by one. The 3rd soldier fell to a shot through the visor. The 4th took 3 bolts to the chest before his armor failed. The 5th hesitated, and that hesitation cost him his life. The 6th soldier was smarter, using cover, advancing cautiously, and Wick realized he had expended nearly all the blaster's charge. He dropped the weapon and drew the vibroblade, the metal singing as it powered up, and when the soldier rounded the column, Wick was waiting. The blade punched through armor with a burst of sparks and a spray of blood, and the soldier collapsed. Taris stood alone, unarmed, but his expression had not changed. "Impressive," he said. "You are everything the report suggested. But you cannot escape. My ship is in orbit, and reinforcements are already en route. Surrender, and I will ensure you are treated well. Resist, and I will take you by force." Wick felt the gate's pull intensifying, the space within the ring shimmering, and he understood with sudden clarity that it was not merely reacting to his presence. It was activating. The locator beacon in his hand was feeding it energy, or information, or both, and the distortion within the ring was widening, becoming a portal, a doorway. He stepped toward it. Taris moved faster than any human should be able to move. Cybernetics or force augmentation or some combination of both, and his hand closed around Wick's wrist like a steel trap. They grappled, Taris attempting to pull him away from the gate, Wick driving his knee into the man's ribs, feeling augmented bone resist the impact. Taris struck back, a blow to the side of Wick's head that made his vision swim, and they fell together, struggling, each seeking advantage. The gate's hum rose to a scream, and the portal within it flared with blinding light. Wick twisted, breaking Taris's grip, and drove the vibroblade into the man's shoulder. Taris gasped, his grip weakening, and Wick pulled free, stumbling toward the gate. He could see shapes moving within the light, shadows of other places, other times. And he understood that the Rakatan device was not merely a door but a crossroads, connecting infinite possibilities. Taris was rising, his face twisted with fury, and he reached for something on his belt. Wick did not wait to see what it was. He stepped into the gate. Reality fractured around him, and he was falling, rising, spinning through a space that had no direction, no substance, only the sensation of motion and the terrible certainty that he had made a choice that could not be undone. He saw flashes of other worlds, other lives, a battlefield lit by green blaster fire, a city of glass towers reflecting alien suns, a forest of crystalline trees singing in frequencies beyond human hearing. And then, for just a moment, he saw his home, the house, the dog waiting by the door, and he reached for it, reaching. The light collapsed. Wick slammed into solid ground, the impact driving the breath from his lungs, and when his vision cleared, he was no longer on Varn. He was lying on stone, cold and smooth, beneath a sky filled with stars he recognized, stars he had seen every night of his life before the threshold took him. He was home. He sat up slowly, his body aching, the vibroblade still clutched in his hand, and looked around. He was in a park, Central Park, the trees bare and the grass brown with winter, and the city's lights glowed in the distance, familiar and warm. He had done it. Against all odds, against the galaxy's weight and the Empire's reach, he had found the gate and used it and survived. But as he stood, as he took his first step toward the distant lights, he felt something wrong. The air was too still. The sounds of the city were absent, and when he looked more closely at the skyline, he saw buildings that should not exist, structures of glass and steel that were too tall, too modern, their designs alien. This was not his New York. This was another New York, another Earth, close enough to be familiar but different in ways he could not yet catalogue. The gate had not sent him home. It had sent him somewhere else, somewhere adjacent, a world that mirrored his own but was not, could never be, the same. Wick felt the weight of grief settle on him once more, heavier than before, because now he understood the truth. There was no going back. The home he had known, the life he had built, the dog that waited, they were gone, lost in the infinite branches of reality, and no gate could bridge that distance. He was alone, but he was alive, and he still had the skills, the will, the capacity for violence that had carried him through one galaxy and could carry him through another. If this world had its criminals, its syndicates, its empires, he would face them the same way he had faced the Crimson Wreath and Imperial intelligence, with precision, with efficiency, with finality. He walked toward the city's lights, the vibroblade sheathed, the blaster's weight absent but not missed, and as he walked, the stars above shifted, constellations rearranging themselves, and he wondered if somewhere, in some other branch of reality, there was a version of himself that had succeeded, that had made it home, that had found peace. He hoped so. But hope was not a strategy, and peace was not something he had ever truly earned. The city swallowed him, and he became, once more, what he had always been. A shadow moving through the underworld, a name whispered in fear, a man who had crossed galaxies and would cross more if that was what survival demanded. John Wick walked into the night, and the night accepted him as its own. Weeks passed. He learned this New York quickly, cataloging its differences, adapting to its rhythms. The criminal underworld here was familiar in structure, if not in specifics, territories, families, codes of conduct enforced through violence. There was no continental, no high table, but there were equivalents, organizations that operated in the shadows and maintained order through fear and respect. He took contracts, small ones at first, proving his capabilities, building a reputation, a debt collector who needed to disappear, a rival gang leader who had outlived his usefulness, a witness who knew too much. Each job was executed with the same precision he had brought to Coruscant, and each job added to the legend that began to form around him, the man with no name who appeared from nowhere and left only corpses behind. But at night, when the work was done and the city slept, he would stand on rooftops and look at the stars, and he would remember. He remembered the lower levels of Coruscant, the neon rain, the smell of ozone and rust. He remembered Dame Myrala's silver mask and the way her voice had carried both threat and curiosity. He remembered Silen Vass, the Zabrak pilot who had flown him to Varn and waited as promised, who had escaped when Imperial reinforcements arrived and had surely cursed his name for bringing her into danger. He remembered Sira, and Kara then, and Orvain Kell, people who had tried to help him in a galaxy that cared nothing for compassion. And he remembered the gate, the way it had pulled at him, the infinite possibilities it had shown him, the cruel promise of home that it had failed to deliver. He did not know if he could return. The locator beacon had been lost in the transition, left behind on Varn, or destroyed in the gate's activation. Without it, without Orvain's guidance, without any map to follow, the path back to that galaxy was closed. And perhaps that was for the best. He had made enemies there, enemies who would not forget, and if Commander Rael Taris had survived their encounter, he would be searching still, patient and relentless. But sometimes, in the moments before sleep, Wick would imagine a different outcome, a version where the gate had worked as intended, where he had stepped through and found his house, his dog, his life waiting exactly as he had left it. In those imaginings, he allowed himself to feel hope, fragile and fleeting, before the reality of his situation crushed it once more. He was not home, would never be home, but he was alive, and for now, that had to be enough. One night, 6 weeks after his arrival in this New York, Wick received a message. It was delivered by a courier, a young woman who found him in a bar in Brooklyn and handed him a sealed envelope before disappearing into the crowd. The envelope was unmarked, but when he opened it, he found a data chip, the same kind he had used in Coruscant, and a note written in precise handwriting. If you wish to return, seek the architect. He knows the way. No signature, no further explanation. Wick stared at the note for a long time, weighing the possibilities. It could be a trap, a lure designed to capture or kill him. It could be nothing, a prank or a case of mistaken identity. Or it could be real, a thread leading back to the galaxy he had left behind, to the gate and the answers he had failed to find. He inserted the chip into a reader and found a single address. A warehouse in Queens, abandoned, off the grid. The choice was his. He could ignore the message, continue building his life in this world, become the legend that this city needed or feared. Or he could follow the thread, risk everything, and discover whether the promise of return was real or just another cruel joke from forces he did not understand. Wick stood, paid for his drink, and walked out into the cold night air. He had crossed galaxies once. He could do it again. And if the architect was real, if there was a way back, he would find it, no matter the cost. The warehouse was exactly as the note described, abandoned, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. Wick approached cautiously, his new weapon, a Glock 19 purchased from a local dealer, heavy in his holster. The area was deserted, industrial, the kind of place where bodies were dumped and questions went unasked. He entered through a side door, its lock broken long ago, and found himself in a space filled with rusted machinery and pools of stagnant water. The air smelled of mold and decay, and his footsteps echoed in the emptiness. "Hello, John," the voice came from above, and Wick spun, his weapon rising, tracking the source. A figure stood on a catwalk, silhouetted against the faint light filtering through the broken roof. The figure descended slowly, steps measured, and as it emerged into the light, Wick saw a man, older, with silver hair and eyes that held the weight of knowledge. "You're the architect," Wick said. "I am. And you are John Wick, displaced from your original reality, pulled through the Rakatan gate into a galaxy far from home, and now displaced again, returned to a world that is almost, but not quite, your own. An unfortunate journey, and one I have been monitoring. Why?" The architect smiled, a sad expression. "Because the gate is not the only device the Rakata built. There are others, scattered across realities, and they occasionally activate, pulling individuals from one universe to another. You are not the first this has happened to, and you will not be the last. But you are unique in that you survived long enough to use the gate a second time. Most do not. Can you send me back? To my original reality?" The architect's smile faded. "No. The gate you used was damaged, incomplete. It could only send you to adjacent realities, worlds that branch from the same origin but diverge in subtle ways. Your original reality is beyond its reach. I am sorry." Wick felt the words like a physical blow, the last fragile hope crumbling. "Then why contact me?" Because there are others, the architect said. Others like you, displaced, searching, and they need someone who understands what they face. I am building a network, a refuge for those the multiverse has forgotten. Join me, and you will have purpose. You will have allies. You will have a place to belong, even if it is not the place you came from. Wick looked at the man, weighing the offer, weighing the cost. He thought of Sarah, who had lost Kara then and continued fighting. He thought of Orvan Kell, who studied the past in hopes of understanding the future. He thought of Silen Vas, who had risked her life to deliver him to Varn despite knowing the danger. He thought of all the people he had met in that galaxy, people who had helped him, and he realized that perhaps the lesson was not about returning home, but about carrying home with him wherever he went. I'll join you, he said, but on one condition. Name it. If you ever find a way to send me back to my original reality, you tell me. No matter how long it takes, the architect nodded. Agreed. Welcome, John Wick, to the Threshold Network. Your skills will serve us well, and in time, perhaps we will find the answer you seek. But for now, there is work to do. The multiverse is vast, and those who are lost within it deserve a chance to be found. Wick extended his hand, and the architect shook it, sealing the pact. The galaxy he had left behind was vast, filled with empires and rebels, crime lords and force users, a universe of light and dark eternally at war. And perhaps, somewhere in that galaxy, Commander Rael Taris was still searching for him, Dame Myrala was still building her network, and the Rakatan Gate still hummed with the promise of infinite doorways. But John Wick was no longer there. He was here, in a new world, with a new purpose, and the skills that had carried him through one galaxy would serve him in the countless others that awaited. The Force, if it existed, had brought him here for a reason, and if that reason was to help others find their way home, then he would embrace it, one contract, one mission, one displaced soul at a time. The stars above shifted once more, and somewhere in the infinite branches of reality, another door opened. But John Wick did not walk through it. Not yet.